you doing, Jake?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Glad you could be on board here today to talk some movies. Our best of the year, best of 2019. Our top 10 best, I should say. We narrowed it down to 10, and I think last year we were pretty general and just kind of giving each film its own spotlight. Here, I don't know if you did the same. I've numbered mine down from 10 to 1, 1 being the very best of the bunch. How many films did you see in 2019 again? Can you tell me?
In 2019, I saw 28 movies.
28.
28
Okay.
movies that were released in 2019. I watched a lot more movies than that. But, yeah, 28 films. I think my first film of 2019 was Glass. And my last film of 2019 was Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Nice. Mine, I don't remember. I didn't take count of how many films I saw that year, or at least in theaters, but the first film I saw in 2019, and I think it, in a weird way, it started off the year right. It kicked it off in a fun way, was Serenity with Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway.
Okay.
And then I ended the year off as well with Star Wars, and that put a bad taste in my mouth. Actually, I will say that taste has been relieved a little bit because I did finally watch all of The Mandalorian on Disney+. I thought it was actually pretty decent. Not great, but it was pretty good.
Yeah, I was saying that last episode was so cinematic. I feel like we could do a whole just review on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved just the small-scale Western feel of it. I think it was really well-deserved in a time with this franchise that's just so overblown and tries to be bigger than it actually is. Like, we want a smaller story. We want to follow a character that doesn't know how to use the Force, has to get by, has a struggle.
Yeah, exactly. At least this new Star Wars trilogy is over.
Yeah, thank God.
Because it was ass.
Well, it's weird. I'm feeling the Star Wars franchise fatigue so hard, yet there's always little things that keep pulling me back, whether it's a meme or a fan theory video or even the Mandalorian show. It's just, Star Wars it'll never leave my backside. It'll just keep wiping its ass with my face.
Yeah. I'm starting to think, we've had so many, bad or disappointing trilogies. Whether it's, I think the Shyamalan's trilogy, and it wasn't bad, but it ended, not perfect. We had the Hobbit trilogy, which was kind of a mess, but I feel like this Star Wars trilogy was just such a clusterfuck. But we can do another video on that.
Yeah, not to derail too much, but even the news just dropped that Kathleen Kennedy has already greenlit Indiana Jones 5, so there's just another franchise ready to burn.
Oh yeah.
She can't stop.
I know. It's ridiculous. And that one's just going to be Harrison Ford in a wheelchair. It's just going to be like Glass, him trying to escape out of a mental institution.
What's that movie called that's coming out soon where it's him and the dog? This dog with CGI eyes.
Yeah, the dog looks like a Furby.
Yes.
It's why can't you just get a real dog? So many other movies have done it.
It's weird watching that trailer too because Harrison Ford actually kind of looks like he's giving a shit.
Yeah, probably because he didn't have to deal with anybody. It was just him alone in a green screen.
All right. We will turn the tables over to 2019 now. Would you say 2019 was a pretty solid year for film in general? Because I found there to be a lot of great movies in 2019 compared to the last few years where it seemed like we were just kind of having our ups and downs. Some films were good standouts, but some films were just, were crippling and falling apart. In 2019, I can name more good films than I can bad films, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think 2019 was a year where I don't feel like there were a lot of disappointments in terms of the movies I was looking forward to. Mm-hmm. Of course, I thought, this was the year, of course, we said the last Avengers movie, which, while it wasn't perfect, I think that ended on a pretty good note. We had well, a lot of these movies are on my list, but yeah, overall, just a lot of surprises and not too many disappointments. I mean, of course, there were bad movies, but those weren't necessarily movies I was looking forward to or had written down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was sort of a year that kind of put a staple on a lot of franchises for good and bad, I guess. I didn't watch the recent Avengers films, or even Endgame, even though it was memed to death everywhere online. But you know, it seemed that movie generally seemed to sit well with audiences, and yeah, I would say it was a cool year to see just a lot of batshit crazy films that nobody was expecting to get, like Dora the Explorer, or a Sonic the Hedgehog trailer, or a blue Will Smith, or Will Smith fighting a Gemini Man. Like, no one was expecting this kind of content in 2019.
I did see Aladdin, and I actually liked it. I thought it was one of those movies that it just seemed like they didn't give a fuck, and I kind of appreciated that, you know?
Who directed it again? It was
Guy Ritchie.
Guy Ritchie. Did it feel anything like a Guy Ritchie film?
Not so much. I mean, there were a couple of his staples, like, you know, there were some fast editing, back and forth dialogue, camera whips, but overall it just was like, I don't know. I just thought the actors were funny. Like, not that they were saying funny things. I just thought, like, their mannerisms. And I don't know, because I watched it with my sister, so maybe that's why we thought it was funny, because we like to laugh at everything. I don't know, it's just their facial expressions and the way they were dressed. It was very interesting to look at.
Okay. Maybe that's a way to kind of go into a Disney remake these days, is to just kind of embrace the mediocrity of it all and just have a laugh, I guess. You might I don't know, I haven't seen The Lion King and I don't want to see it, but I feel like you'd have a harder time laughing at that film. You'd just be bored. You'd fall asleep.
Yeah, because that movie's just CGI garbage.
I will say, by the way, that my top 10, narrowing it down to the top 5 was a little bit tougher, but the rest of it was not too hard. I just had to really dig through the archives of what I'd watched. All right, let's get this countdown underway. So, my number 10 of 2019 is a big surprise for some. It was a film I was not expecting to enjoy as much as I did. It's a little film called Crawl, directed by Alexandre Aja. I hope I pronounced his name right. He's a French director, known for, mostly popular for High Tension, The Hills Have Eyes remake, and Piranha 3D. And right off the bat, I'll say what I love so much about this movie is how confined to this little crawl space this movie is. I think it's quite a clever setting for a movie, you know, having a small area where even just moving around is terrifying, but the whole time the characters need to be moving. They have to be on their feet. They need to be able to swim, because the whole time this film is taking place during an extreme flooding of a house during a hurricane, where there are gators roaming around. I will say, part of me wished at first that the director had, I don't know, established, I guess, the geography of the room a little bit more clearly, so we at least know exactly where everything was. But as it went along, I think it was actually a good thing that we didn't have the full clarity of the scope of the house, because I think not knowing that actually lent itself to the suspense a lot more, because you don't know what is a good exit out and what is a trip to your death, basically. Most of what makes horror work is the lack of clarity or like lack of explanation. Yeah, I had a ball with Crawl. I thought it was a solid sci-fi horror action flick. People would probably look at it on the surface as a, you know, stock by the numbers sci-fi channel original movie, and they'd be partly correct in looking at it that way. But when you get into the core of it, it actually is about a father-daughter dynamic that's sort of struggling, but really trying to piece itself back together. And I think that was the core of what made the movie so good, because you do care about these characters. You do want to see them get out alive. And I don't know, in a film like this, you don't see that happen very often. I hope we get more creature flicks like this where, you know, they give this much attention to characters who actually have skills that they use to their advantage too. Again, we have the character Haley. She's played by Kaya, I'm going to butcher this name, Scandalario, British actress, but, you know, she uses her deep diving swimming skills to her advantage against these monsters and to survive. And I also love seeing Barry Pepper, you know, pop up in anything too. He's a delight.
Oh yeah, I totally agree what you mean. Like really at its heart, it is like a family story, and it's all wrapped up in this total drive-in B-movie, creature feature that just feels like it's a double feature, you know?
Yeah, you would see that as drive-in, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I really enjoyed that one as well.
I hear some Floridians even say that it's like a near-perfect documentary, which gives me more reason to not want to go to Florida or live there.
Right. And they're all scared of alligators there.
It is over-stylized, it is over-exaggerated, but it is shockingly a little relatable. If you like live in that area, there's got to be aspects to it where you think, yeah, there's always a chance a gator could just come up from the creek and like invade my house.
Right. Exactly.
So that is my number 10, Crawl.
Okay. So just to tell everyone out there, I had a hard time making my top 10 list, so kind of my number 10 through 6 is just kind of more enjoyment movies, entertainment, popcorn. And so at my number 10, I actually put probably the most anticipated movie of my life, which was Godzilla.
Nice.
Yeah, so I think I had been waiting for Hollywood to make this movie since I was about 4 years old. So going into it, I obviously had high expectations that weren't met. However, upon rewatches and just kind of getting the whole vibe of the movie, I do think Michael Daughtry, who directed it, he also did Trick or Treat, which is that anthology Halloween film, and Krampus, which were all really good monster movies. Mm-hmm. I think what he did with Godzilla was really just a service of respect. You know, he could have made a movie for general audiences that veered from the tone and sort of the history of the franchise, but he didn't do that, and he really made a movie for the fans that really stayed in the spirit of the original franchise, regardless of what casual audiences would think. And talking to other people who are familiar with the franchise, I mean, you can point out a million cool little Easter eggs. You know, the more niche an audience is for a franchise like this, I feel like the more special it feels and the more people are able to connect with it. And so, yeah, everything just from the little story beats to the character designs to even some of the shot choices, I think it's just a great, just shows a great deal of respect to the franchise. And, you know, in one way, I'm kind of happy that it wasn't this huge, big success, because I wouldn't want something like this to explode into an American franchise because it is solely Japanese. But I think it is cool that, you know, we did get our true American Godzilla movie. We're no longer stuck with the Roland Emmerich one. And I'm happy with that, and I think it's it leaves its good mark on the franchise, which is very close to my heart.
Well, first off, I think you said it very eloquently. I think there is certainly a place for the Roland Emmerich film. It is not by any means a good or perfect film, but it is one that is of the time and has some enjoyment factor to it. But going back to this film, Godzilla King of the Monsters, I do think in terms of like what you can do with this character, with this franchise for American audiences, they pulled off quite a lot in terms of scope, in terms of the weight of these monsters, in terms of what you could do with the human characters. There's just not very much, but they do at least give them some sort of central conflict so that they're not just standing around letting the monsters kind of run amok and do their business. They actually have a level of purpose. It does a poor job, I think, of building up the ties to this secret organization with the Charles Dance character. and what their plans are to do with these monsters, but we'll see where it goes with the new film. I guess this would be Godzilla vs. Kong coming out soon.
Yeah, and I've heard a theory that the bad guys, including Charles Dance, could have been aliens, which they should have just ran with that.
I would have been fine with that, yeah, if they just went full, googly-eyed alien.
Space apes.
And I do enjoy in this film that Godzilla, is sort of this indifferent beast who is like unleashed from his nest when necessary, and to deliver all of these monsters that nobody could even comprehend would have hit the big screen in U.S. audiences at this time is quite a marvelous splendor for the eyes. They all looked really good.
Right, and I thought being an American movie, they would have brought, King Ghidorah, the three-headed dragon, to the forefront, but nah. Clearly, we're here to see Godzilla. He's the one who kicks ass in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Still pissed off as ever.
Yeah, he's always pissed.
I don't think he's ever been happy.
I think, yeah, he even kicks his son in some of the older movies.
Oh, so he's an abusive father, too.
Yeah.
Cool. So that is your number 10. All right. Moving down the list. At number 9, I have a smaller scale film that you can now watch on Amazon Prime, I believe. It is a film directed by Jennifer Kent, who brought us The Babadook a few years ago. It's called The Nightingale.
We don't want no trouble.
That's just the way, isn't it? You don't want trouble, but sometimes trouble wants you.
Is there I to sit and cry my fill?
Get me to the soldiers that came by this morning.
It's too dangerous. Up north, they kill us. You sure you want to follow him?
And every tear would turn a man.
They close. What are you doing?
Have you heard of this movie?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
To give a quick rundown of the plot, The Nightingale, it takes place in the early 1800s, and you follow a 22-year-old Irish convict who's serving as a slave for this British soldier with her husband. They have like a newborn baby. She becomes bent on revenge for this terrible act of violence that is committed against her family by the soldier and his friends as they go off to venture to another town so that they can clear themselves of their misdeeds and work up in the ranks in the British office. And she enlists the services of this Aboriginal tracker named Billy, who is also marked by trauma from these British soldiers and has a violent-filled past as well. And it becomes this really dark, brooding, uncompromising thriller of a woman who's lost basically everything and only wants to see these guys dead. And even then, you think there would be something earned in that. And what I respect about this revenge film in the grand scale, I guess, of revenge films that we've been getting in recent years is that it does not paint it as a good thing. It doesn't paint it as anything that's glorified. It's actually very ugly. And very real in terms of consequences. And so to see, a character broken down this hard, but then also realize she can't even bring herself to fully go all the way is heartbreaking, but also understandable. And to see what it does to other characters around her is truly remarkable. It is a really intense film, not easy to watch. Kind of deals with sexuality, nationality, and nature even, and just how the clash, I guess, of just different kinds of people who walk different kinds of life, and just that seething, terrible nature that is humanity. I was enthralled with it. It is a departure from something like The Babadook, which I probably like a little bit more in terms of its stylized presentation and just a cool, really unique take on grief. And I think The Nightingale is a good counterbalance in terms of handling, I guess, grief is there, but I would say, yeah, revenge and redemption.
Great. I'll have to check it out. I just looked it up, added it to my list. Was this the director's second film?
I don't fully know. I think she might have made something before the Babadook, but I'd have to double check on that. But this is her second after the Babadook. Yeah.
All right, that's your number 9. So my number 9 is a early movie, from earlier in the year that I put this movie down for the sheer entertainment of it, and I've since seeing it in the theaters, and this movie's got rewatch value, and that was Alita: Battle Angel.
Okay. I was thinking about this movie the other day.
Yeah, Robert Rodriguez back from his whatever he was doing with Machete 2 and Spy Kids 4. This is him coming back and just having a ball. Pretty sure he shot most of this movie in his studio at his house.
Yeah.
Christoph Waltz, great cast. I mean, the big eyes bugged me out at first, but I think it just adds to just the weird vibe this movie has, and it's just a good time at the movies. I mean, just entertaining. You can tell everyone is just having a good time while making it. I thought the special effects were really, really good, especially kind of the robot-human hybrids they do. The set design reminds me of something like Blade Runner, like very good cyberpunk feeling. And just like overall, just like really, really fun time, great action, and quintessential Rodriguez in a lot of parts.
Yeah, I see some people criticize it for not really getting deeper into the psychology of a character like Alita, but I think she is such an admirable protagonist in that she sees the good in other people and wants to, find a balance, is not like a character who just wants violence for the sake of violence, wants to, defend, but like sees a hopeful future for this world and the people that she surrounds herself with. Yeah, you're right. It is a very good looking movie. You do get a good sense of this world, the relationship between the hunter killers and these cyborgs. And it even had a bit of a Spy Kids feel to it, that kind of 90s sort of Rodriguez that we just don't see much anymore. And you could say that we still get that in some of his later films from the 2000s, but this I think was really refreshing in terms of the look and just the overall bouncy fun tone it was going for. And it doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's probably the best way to just kind of go in and just, you're having fun. It's a popcorn flick.
Yeah, and I also really like when movies make fictional sports,
Mm-hmm.
Like, and
yeah.
you had that rollerblading sport they had, which reminded me of something like, like rollerball, where it's just, people are just getting torn apart. That was really cool and a very exhilarating sort of like confined chase scene. So
Absolutely.
Stand out from me. Not a movie I expected to like as much as I did.
I hope we get the sequel soon, since it does sequel bait with Ed Norton showing up at the end. Spoilers.
He shows up for like one shot that's like 3 seconds long.
You are someone very special.
It's a harsh world. The strong prey on the weak down here.
That's not the way it has to be. I'm gonna need you to stand way back.
I'm with her.
I don't understand how she could create such power. She's just a girl.
She contains technologies that have been lost for 300 years. If you let her live, she will destroy the natural order of things. If you wreck this body, I can't fix it.
I know, but I do not stand by in the presence of evil.
We'll move on down the list. Number 8 is a film brought to you by the director of It Follows, director David Robert Mitchell. He greeted us with a film that was not marketed very well by A24 and kind of went through a little bit of a production hell, you could say, because it technically did not release in 2019, but it hit US in 2019. And this is a film called Under the Silver Lake.
Haven't seen it.
It stars Andrew Garfield, and it's a film that's very divisive among people, and yeah, as I said, had not the best marketing, but it's sort of a neo-noir piece that kind of tips its cap to the master of suspense throughout the movies. It's like a wild mystery with twists in LA culture nowadays. So from the first scene, you know that something is off about this world that it takes place in, and you have Andrew Garfield, who's this paranoid, nerdy, and I would say almost very horny character, but he's also kind of likable. And he meets this girl in his apartment complex one day, this mysterious girl who comes out of nowhere. And then the second day, she sort of just disappears from his life, but leaves these hints of clues to where he could maybe track her and figure out what's even going on and why his worldview is kind of messed with in this daisy LA culture that he's sort of wrapped up in. And the film kind of breaks down into what is sort of a corrupt, greasy, just awful sort of setting that is LA. For most people that haven't been to LA, it's got a bit of a seedy background, and that's not something of the past, that is still currently happening now. And I would say this movie exposes a lot of the just the nastiness of the culture of Hollywood, of the industry. It's kind of a ballsy move of director David Robert Mitchell to make a movie like this, where, you know, everything else is just so glamorized when it comes to LA and California. So it becomes this spiritual journey for Andrew Garfield as he goes deeper into the cracks, I guess you could say down the hills of Hollywood. Yeah, I was kind of mesmerized by it. It's really creepily shot, but it's also really funny and absurd. It's a mesh of genres, and I can't recommend it enough to people who like something that's a little bit more thought-provoking, but also just weird. It invokes that really well.
Cool. Added to my list. I've heard about it a lot. A lot of people talked about it. I saw it was marketed as sort of a black comedy.
That would be a correct description. Yeah.
Yeah. Sweet. I'll have to add it up. So my number 8 was a movie I watched on an airplane that I heard a lot about, and I ended up really enjoying it, and that was Yesterday.
Okay. Yesterday I really enjoyed too.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge Beatles fan. Like, of course, everyone else, I like the Beatles, but I never really explored, took a deep dive into the Beatles' discography, or, you know, really put that much effort into really getting to know them. But just as a movie about this wannabe big musician who just finds himself in this situation, I just thought it was so entertaining. And just the way he reacts to this whole strange, unexplained circumstance where he wakes up and the Beatles have never existed, and he has a chance to make something of himself by, I guess in some way, stealing the world's most famous rock band's songs and making himself something of himself from it. It's just such an interesting concept. You know, it's played for drama, it's played for laughs, and overall just really good, and especially his relationship with his best friend, who's also his manager, played by Lily James. I just thought that relationship was really, really good, and develops in a really, really nice, heartwarming way throughout the film.
They had really tight chemistry, I do agree.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed seeing things like, you know, if the Beatles have never existed, what else would never exist, you know? No one smokes cigarettes, like Coca-Cola doesn't exist, Harry Potter, all these really, really strange things. And yeah, overall really good, heartwarming movie, entertaining. Seems a little different for Danny Boyle.
A little bit. It's tough because Danny Boyle, he will slap his style on any sort of film. Usually it is a dramedy or dark drama, but I would say this is sort of still up his alley in terms of, if you want to compare it to a film, I think that's a little bit more catered to families, like Millions. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
No, I know about it though.
But yeah, no, and I think with a movie like this, Yesterday, I also like how it sort of just taps into just how awful the music industry kind of is. The more and more famous you get, and just how they basically own you and control what you can and can't produce. It's so dictating, and I think it's cool that it kind of just shows the the rougher side of that, but never like to a nasty degree, but like to a comedic level. Like people kind of pick up like, oh yeah, that's probably definitely how it is.
Yeah, just the simple fact that they're trying to change the lyrics on the Beatles songs, which is kind of like this,
Yeah.
it just, yeah, just weird from like watching it from the audience perspective, and especially knowing a lot of these Beatles songs.
It does cleverly subvert the whole liar reveal trope, because you anticipate this whole time that he's going to get caught by these two figures who know exactly that he is not making these songs up from scratch, that he is taking these songs directly from a band that existed. But they actually they give him like open arms and embrace him, because they are glad that a musician like him is able to bring this to a new universe that doesn't have this kind of music. Whether you like the Beatles or not, they've basically cemented themselves in music history, and it seems like that's what the movie really appreciated. It didn't waste its time with the whole trope of a guy that has to like cover up his mistakes or come up with a lie the whole time through and see if he can get away with it.
Yeah, right. So just a lighthearted, fun, family comedy drama that really caught me by surprise, and I enjoyed it while watching it on an airplane. So I guess that says something.
That is a plus, because usually airplane movies can be a make or break scenario. We'll move on here, so we're not wasting too much time. My number 7. This will be a bit of a surprise, because I rewatched this a while back just to get a better consensus of what I might have missed the first time. But my number 7 is The Lighthouse, directed by Robert Eggers.
Nice.
I know you really love this film. And I think upon second viewing, I definitely appreciate a lot more of what it was tapping into, especially with, I would say, the scenario of, I guess, either man versus man or man versus self, if you subscribe to the theory that this is simply one character instead of two. And it takes a cool sort of period piece and location with two characters who are at such odds. They're so different from one another, and it's basically their psychological nightmarish breakdown and how it's both shared and conflicting with one another. I love Willem Dafoe and I love Robin Pattinson in this and what they bring to these characters. One's much older, much more bitter, but definitely is more seasoned and knows his way around. The one is younger, kind of more rebellious, but also doesn't really want to be there at all, doesn't like his job, doesn't appreciate anything in life. The older one is more religious, the other one is a little bit more agnostic. It's a really cool clash of just two men that just are on the bridge of insanity. And I know I was cracking jokes the first time when, we compared it so much to our film, Manic Manor, which is also about two guys that kind of go insane, but to a much more comedic level. I do appreciate what Robert Eggers was trying to do here. I think the performances shine through. I think the visuals really stand out. You have this really cool Kurosawa-esque framing in just about every single shot. And you have a really unique setting. I would say it's late 19th century with this sort of seaman dialogue that you just don't hear very often in film nowadays. I thought the score was great. I think it's stunning. I think it's not a strong narrative, but that's not really what it's trying to be. I don't think it's scary, but that's also not really a fair criticism of a film that's more trying to be a psychological experience. I think that's what it's really trying to shoot for. It's trying to really get to those nerves, to show just the breakdown and the connection between two people who are isolated. And whatever's happening may not even be happening. For all we know, it could all be a dream. It could be a cycle. It could be a paradox. I think there's a lot there you can really pick apart, and you can tell there was a lot of love and care and craft that went into this.
Yeah, I agree. And going to what you said about the it's not much of a plot, I would agree with that. And essentially what I felt with the movie is from the opening, you feel the tension between these two characters. And it kind of starts off with Willem Dafoe's characters just giving orders and not much dialogue. But then the movie kind of repeats this cycle and this scene over and over and over again. And each time it just boils up more and more to eventually these characters are giving these huge speeches to each other, just bubbling with this ferocious energy, and then it it all climaxes in a way that gets a little goofy at times, but definitely very, very intense. And I really like that. I think it's really interesting. It's an interesting way to structure your movie and tell your story. And also, going back to what you said, it's hard to make a movie look good shot in that box format, and this movie pulls it off. I mean, at least as good as it does,
Yeah. My one major complaint is that I wish it would play up a little bit more with the sea-like imagery with the mermaids, these Greek mythological creatures that I guess they were trying to hinting at. Even more with the seagulls, I would have been fine with too, even though we did get a good amount of devotion to those elements. But I some more supernatural elements I think would have been well deserved. But I think what we ended up getting was still pretty solid, and I don't know if I'm fully set on saying it's better than The Witch yet. I still need to give it some more thought, and maybe I need to rewatch The Witch again as well. But Robert Eggers, he's really proven himself already with just these two films that he is masterful behind the camera, has a clear and present vision, knows how to direct these actors who are giving it their 100%, and I'm looking forward to what he does next.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. And he's a great writer as well. I think he's definitely, him and Ari Aster, who also had a film this year, Midsommar, are getting compared because they're very two auteur horror directors, and it's kind of unfair to compare them, but I think I always do in my mind, and I think whereas Ari Aster maybe goes more for that visual shock horror, I think Robert Eggers has the edge on him when it just comes to dialogue and writing and these really, really deep characters.
Really setting you to that time period.
Yeah, and the time period as well, because both of his movies have been period pieces, and he's really, really tapped into that in a way that's like really convincing and really interesting and doesn't feel fake at all.
I hear his next film is going to be another period piece, and he is set to cast Willem Dafoe again, so we'll see what that turns out to be.
Yeah, I've heard he's going to do Vikings.
Oh, Vikings. Oh, sweet.
So, yeah, that'd be awesome. Okay, so my number 7 was yet another movie I watched on an airplane, which I really enjoyed. It's definitely a feel-good movie, which I feel like when a movie is trying to make you feel good, it turns some people away because it may feel like it's trying too hard. But when a movie does make you feel good, you feel good. And so that's why I picked The Peanut Butter Falcon.
Awesome. I still need to see this, but I'm glad you have it on your list.
Yeah. First of all, I really liked it because the main character has Down syndrome, and the actor has Down syndrome, and he is a Down syndrome character, and it's great. Like, it works really, really well. He's a pretty good actor, and the way he works with Shia LaBeouf is just great. I mean, there are scenes where Shia LaBeouf is just not putting up with his bullshit, and it just feels so real, and it works really well. And this really, really sweet relationship blossoms between them, and the movie revolves around Shia LaBeouf accompanying this character who's going to look for his famous or his favorite like WWE wrestler. So that's like the whole goal of the whole thing. So of course you want to see him get to it, and you want to see Shia LaBeouf, who's this very damaged and troubled character, and you like seeing how he grows and builds this relationship. And the movie did make me feel good. It's got kind of this Huckleberry Finn vibe to it because it's set in the South. I think it's set in Georgia. So that southern area, they're on rafts going down the river, just like
a Mark Twain story.
Just like a Mark Twain story. I really enjoyed it. I want to see it again. I've heard they made the movie because their friend who has Down syndrome, let me see his name. Their friend wanted to be an actor in a movie, so they were able to raise all this money and get all this fine. Zach Gottsagen.
Zach Gottsigan. Okay.
And his character's name is Zach too. So they raised all this money and got enough financing to construct this movie for him. And yeah, it turned out really great. Thomas Hayden Church is in it as the wrestler, and he gets some good screen time, and yeah, he's great in it. But yeah, Zach Gottsigan's definitely the standout role in this. And yeah, it's good to see. I always like seeing Shia LaBeouf and stuff too. I mean, say what you want about him starting off in Transformers and doing his Indiana Jones thing, but I always enjoy seeing him. It seems like he's always given a good effort.
Yeah, he's always been a committed actor, and this also came out the same year as Honey Boy, which I still need to see, but I think we are starting to see sort of a more self-aware Shia LaBeouf that we haven't gotten in the last few years, where he's kind of aware of where his career's taken, and he's trying to take more serious routes and be taken seriously as an actor. And I wasn't there like a time where Shia LaBeouf screened all of his movies?
Yeah, and he like sat in a theater and watched all of them.
All of them. It wasn't he just passed out, like asleep and drunk probably during the Transformers films.
I don't know, but I think they started with like the Even Stevens movie.
His favorite, I'm sure. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check out Peanut Butter Falcon. It's been on my list for a while. It seemed a little, from the trailers, a little bit heartthrobby, kind of cheesy, but like still a fun ride. And how you describe it seems like I would really enjoy it.
Kind of like a more lighthearted Rain Man. Even though Rain Man has its comedic elements too, but definitely that relationship, like in Rain Man, you get with Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise. It's very similar to that.
I will move on then to number 6. And I was debating where I was going to kind of rank this on the list, but I ended up putting it here. But I went with Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which you have seen too, right?
I have seen it, yeah.
This, I think, is perhaps his best film since Jackie Brown. Jackie Brown being my favorite of his, but I would say if you were in this position where you had to make just a pure love letter to film, seeing films, making films, being in films, it probably doesn't get better than this. I'm sure there's other examples I probably come up with, but in terms of recent years, this film is a huge love letter to why the cinema is still so golden and so important and so nostalgic for people. I think setting it around this time where we were getting around to the new wave of cinema, where films were taking more bolder choices, actors were doing a little bit more lay acting and not really trying to be showy or theatrical. They wanted to actually show a more grounded performance for audiences. Definitely shines and reflects in this film, and I think seeing this world, seeing Hollywood as it was at this time, pitting it during this weird period with the Manson family, with Sharon Tate, who I think is actually a pretty important character in this, even though some would describe her as just being completely pointless and uselessly inserted into this film. But I think she's actually a solid, I would say, ulterior character to Leonardo DiCaprio, who is a guy who's sort of bumbling at this point. He's not getting the roles he used to get. He's maybe getting bit parts here and there in an FBI show, or but just these little bit parts that sort of like basically bring him down as an actor and not really elevate him. And the whole time too, he's got this character, Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt, who's his stunt double, but has stuck by him for so long. You really do buy their friendship. You buy this sort of connection where he really does see this as just a job that's fun, and he does it till the day he dies, basically. But going back to Sharon Tate, she's like the good opposite dynamic to Leo's character, because she is enthralled with the cinema, with these roles that she gets, even if they're small parts, even if they're just little small roles that really will not stand the test of time. She just loves seeing herself on the screen. She loves seeing just the power of images and words meshing together in a montage. I think that works to the film's effect. I think the set design is impeccable. The amount of road coverage they had to dress just to make Hollywood look so much of the 60s must have been really tough. So kudos to the whole production department, the set decorators, and everybody involved who made this place feel lively and inserting these characters from history but giving it sort of a twist. I think tonally it's consistently really funny right down to the climax, which gets pretty intense. I won't say much for those who haven't seen it, but you should watch it all the way through. And I wish it was longer, honestly. I think it could have used another half hour or so. I think they're actually in talks of doing a series just about Leonardo DiCaprio's character, but right down to scenes where you have Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio riffing basically a TV show he was in. I could watch a whole commentary track with just them two talking. It was that interesting to see. So I think overall, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is it's going to stick out as one of the greats of Tarantino's repertoire. He's his last couple of films, I've enjoyed them, they certainly have kind of missed that punch, and I think this one it brought back something I really liked about his stylized vision that goes into his work. So yeah, I would say this is a worthy contender to be on my top 10 list.
Yeah, I saw it as well. I felt the length in the movie, but what you said going on about, the set dressing, I mean, they nailed that time period perfectly. And I thought it was one of Brad Pitt's best performances in a while. I mean, Leo was great. The whole cast is good. I mean, that's what you're going to get in a Tarantino movie, but Brad Pitt was definitely the standout for me.
Have you actually bought into the theory that Cliff Booth is basically Stuntman Mike from Death Proof, but younger?
I don't know. I could see it. It seems like something Tarantino would do.
It's just fascinating. I don't really think it's true, but it certainly is something to pick your brain about. I also did really enjoy the scene with Bruce Lee kind of getting his ass kicked. I know that scene a lot of people are criticizing because they overpraise Bruce Lee. I think allegedly Bruce Lee was a pretty talented fighter, but he was not as strong as people were making him out to be. And I think this movie kind of plays up on that a little bit, but I thought that scene was funny regardless.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too, and that guy who played Bruce Lee just really nailed it, I thought.
Oh yeah.
I totally believe that was Bruce Lee. I mean, from what I hear, that it did, Bruce Lee was in his head a little bit in real life, so... But that's another thing, Tarantino does, is build up these caricatures of these people, I mean, in Inglourious Bastards, he killed Hitler.
Yeah, he wants to loosely rewrite history that fits his narrative. I will say the one gripe I have with this movie is that there's too much feet.
There's a lot of feet in it. His next movie's just gonna be feet. He's gonna do like Thumb Wars, but it's gonna be feet.
Those cameo, he'll just insert his face on every toe.
Yeah. All right. So down to my number 6, a film you've already mentioned, and that is Crawl.
Sweet.
Yeah, Crawl surprised me. I have not seen that director's films. He did Hills Have Eyes, and did he do Piranha?
He did Piranha 3D.
Piranha 3D, which I haven't seen. I saw Hills Have Eyes when I was younger and found it very disturbing, but I enjoyed it. But I thought, he knocked it out of the park with this one. Like you said, that confined space in it, that central story between the father and daughter, which actually works. You have Sam Raimi producing, and I felt we got a few Evil Dead nods in there from sort of some of the POV shots to there's one scene where a branch comes flying through a window for a jump scare, which is straight out of the first Evil Dead. It's just a great fun popcorn movie that this is why I watch movies, is just to be entertained and laugh and be scared when I need to be, and just have a good time. So not much else to say about it besides what we already talked about, but definitely one that I want to add to my horror movie collection.
Absolutely. Yeah, as we've already talked about with Crawl, it's engaging. You do give a shit about these characters, and even the side characters too. No one's a bad apple, or they don't insert just a dickish character just for the sake of having one that you can kill off briefly. Everybody kind of has a brief moment. Everyone has an arc in some way, shape, or form, and when shit goes deep, it really does hit hard. So just that level of attention and care and detail to its characters, I think is, is missing in a lot of films like this. So it was really good to see it in Crawl.
You got this!
You need to go now.
I'm not leaving you here!
I will move on then to number 5. This is quite a trip of a film directed by Gaspar Noé. It is a film called Climax.
Okay.
I've been a fan of this guy for a while. Gaspar Noé is he will go sort of balls to the wall crazy to show off as much of his style as he can. He will not cut. He will not stick to one frame. He will just keep moving the camera. He will keep taking you on a trip regardless of what's happening on camera. Irreversible is still one of the most brutally intense films ever made, I would say. What this guy does, I think is pretty admirable and definitely earns its spot on this list. So you have a film like Climax, which is a simple premise. It's a bunch of young dancers who gather in a remote and empty school building to rehearse on a really cold and wintry night. And when the all-night celebration soon turns into this hallucinatory nightmare, when they learn that their sangria during their party is laced with LSD, that's when things go completely AWOL and everybody is just losing their minds. I haven't seen like an acid trip conveyed in this way before. I'm really hard pressed to come up with another example, but we're watching characters who are already sort of kind of having their own inner issues with their peers. We get these 2 sequences. We get 3, I should say. There's an opening sequence that sort of introduces the tone that is set for this film. There's like a stack of videotapes. They're showing films like I want to say like Necromantic or Evil Dead, or Suspiria's on that list too, just to kind of set the tone that you would want to recognize that this film was sort of portraying. Then you have a scene following that where it's all these dancers going through their rehearsal, and it's a pretty well choreographed sequence. I think it could make a good short film on its own. And followed from that, you have this very, I want to say, French New Wave, Jim Jarmusch sort of style sequence where characters are cutting from one to another, just kind of having these simple conversations. It kind of goes on a little bit longer than need be. I think that's probably one major complaint I have about this film. But then from there, once the party is like set in motion, this spiked alcohol is just gone to everybody. It's affected all their brain transmitters. They just don't know what's real, what isn't. They become paranoid. They hurt each other. They have sex with each other. Some people get trapped. Some people get stuck in their own inner illusions. Some people are basically giving up or committing suicide, and some people are just going to sleep. It's every kind of reaction you would have to a trip, perhaps, I guess you could say. The whole time it's psychedelic. The camera just keeps lingering. It shows just the horror of what it's like to not be in control of yourself. And everybody walking around these long, dark, dimly lit hallways of this echoey building it's haunting. It is almost horror levels of haunting, but it's also trippy and weird and hypnotizing. And it really goes for the punch. It just never lets up. And then when it comes to its final climax, pun intended, that's when you can kind of take a sigh of relief and say, wow, that just happened. I can't believe I sat through all of that. It's just 90 minutes of insanity.
Nice. Sweet. I remember when it came out, but I think it had a pretty limited run. I never got around to seeing it, but added to my list.
It's a shame it didn't. Well, I don't really care that it didn't get nominated for cinematography, but it is really this cool angular and disorienting sort of camera work that I think is basically slapped itself to Gaspar Noé, and not many other directors have pulled off what he's done on that kind of budget too.
Okay. So my number 5 was a movie that caught my attention before it came out from a few of the trailers, and from what I've heard, it's gotten a mixed response from general audiences, from my sister who saw it and her space aeronautic friends who are actually studying aeronautics in school, who said it was scientifically inaccurate, but that's fine. And that was Ad Astra.
We're doing big things up here, real big.
What did he find out there in the abyss?
The enemy up here is not a person or a thing. It's the endless void. The world awaits our discovery, my son.
James Gray recently, or his last film he directed, which we're both a fan of, is Lost City of Z. And I think one thing we both really appreciated about that was it's sort of old school, adventurous, grandiose explorer feel, you know? It's a couple of guys adventuring into the wilderness of the jungle, and you really feel that expanse of what it must have been like back then. You know, no cell phones, no cars, no easy escapes when you're going into the hell that is the jungle. Just bugs and water and all that nasty stuff. And he takes that same approach in Ad Astra, but applies it to space. And I think it gives off this really, really I don't want to say old school, and I don't want to say realistic, but it's this confined, slow view of space travel. And when you're traveling through space, it's not like Interstellar or Star Wars or anything like that, where you're just zipping all over the place. I mean, hell, this whole movie they don't even leave the solar system. The furthest they go out is to Neptune. It's just great. A really, really unique and interesting look at space travel, and at the heart of it is really this story of Brad Pitt going to find his father, who's been played by Tommy Lee Jones, who's lost in space or refuses to come back home. And so it also kind of references the novel Heart of Darkness or the film Apocalypse Now. You have this character on this journey through this mysterious land, going to find someone who may or may not have lost their mind, you know. And once they finally reach their destination, I think this movie pulls at the heartstrings a little bit and really has a really good payoff. You haven't seen it yet, right?
I have not seen it yet, but I do plan on watching it very soon. The way you're describing it, it sounds like a way better remake of Lost in Space.
Right, yeah. Oh gosh, I haven't thought about that movie in years. But yeah, again, Brad Pitt I thought was really, really good in this. It's been a strong year for him. A really, really understated performance. I mean, yeah, really, really good from him. Tommy Lee Jones is, of course, Tommy Lee Jones. I thought the special effects here were amazing. Especially there's this one scene where these characters are on a little car chase through the moon, or on the moon, and I thought that was just great. I saw it on a big screen in theaters, and just really, really good. Great colors, great sound design, I thought. Great set design. Doesn't overdo it. In a lot of places keeps it very subtle. Just a really, really cool vision of the near future.
In terms of space movies we've been getting recently, First Man, Interstellar, The Martian. In terms of a lot of these space films that we get each year, how does Ad Astra to you compare to those?
I feel like all these science fiction movies all have a common character theme, which is essentially loneliness. You know, in First Man, you deal with Neil Armstrong dealing with the death of his daughter, and sort of, you know, I mean, the climax of the movie is just him bouncing around on the moon alone. In Interstellar, you have Matthew McConaughey leaving his family, being alone in space. missing his family. And The Martian, you have a dude who's alone in on Mars. So Ad Astra, I think I appreciated for its slower pace, its confined view, and Brad Pitt's performance I thought was really good. I mean, of course, he throws out some of those cheesy, pretentious lines. And the movie does have some added action scenes which feel out of place, but, you know, it's not like those action scenes were handled without care. It seems like they were forced to put them in there by the studio, and they made the most of it. Definitely one to watch on a high-quality television, I would say.
All right, I will definitely see if I can watch it in its best quality possible.
Yeah, for sure.
On a big screen. And then I'll watch Speed Racer right afterwards on that same big screen.
Oh, yeah? Speed Racer, slow down. When are we going to get Speed Racer 2?
I know, right? The Wachowskis want to put all their money into this new Matrix film, which I don't think is going to be very good.
After Jupiter Ascending, I'm surprised they even got funding.
Okay. I will go ahead and move this on to number 4. I've already lost count. So this is a film that basically had my ass cheeks just clenched during the whole runtime. It is a little movie called Uncut Gems, directed by the Safdie brothers.
Okay, don't spoil too much for me.
I'll try not to. This is their second film of theirs that I've seen, apart from Good Time, which Good Time is a film I liked a bit more. I thought it was my favorite film of 2017, just capturing so eloquently the 1970s grungy, filthy looking aesthetic of New York City that we just don't see anymore. Nowadays it's a pretty pompous, pretty joyful place to live, but if anybody who even lives in New York City can tell you there are shady parts all over the map of that location. And the Safdie brothers, you can tell they know the place in and out and really want to get to that grainy sort of look that, you know, is kind of missing nowadays. And I think it's a much more honest portrayal of setting and location. But yeah, so you in this film Uncut Gems, you follow a really charismatic New York City jeweler who's always on the lookout for the next big score and just makes an ongoing series of mistakes, of high stakes, that these bets and these deals that, you know, could lead to the richest life possible, but it could also make you deteriorate and fall apart and be consumed with your own greed. And we have Adam Sandler playing Howard in this film, who's just this always on the edge, high wire business guy who's always just sort of scummy, works under the radar, makes bets he doesn't even know will fall through or not, and gets off on it at the same time. And this is what makes him so fascinating as a character, is that we're seeing some guy who never once comes to the realization that every good or bad thing that happens to him is because of what he does. He's always kind of shifting the blame or kind of putting everybody else in his worldview as an instigator for his problems or his successes. But the whole time it's like you feel paranoid, you feel on the edge, you are stressed out watching a guy that you both kind of loathe but also pity. And this is by far Adam Sandler's best performance, without a doubt. I would say Punch Drunk Love comes close to this, but I've never seen him like this engaged in a role before. And just, I don't know, I was enthralled with where he was taking this character and just the downward spiral and sometimes the upward spiral he was going on throughout the course of the movie. I won't spoil a lot of the key scenes and plot points that occur, but you would have to really try hard to fall asleep during a movie like this, because it is just so on its toes the whole time. It never lets up. It always just keeps you glued to the screen, and I think that's really hard to do for a lot of filmmakers. And I want to see more of what the Safdie brothers can bring to this kind of high stakes rush.
Nice. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. Where do you see... Would you say it's similar in tone to Good Time? Like, can you see sort of like a flavor that the Safdie brothers are going with in their filmography?
They do like a kind of like a crossbreed of stuff, I would say, because even in the title's font, it's very John Carpenter-esque. What sets this movie apart from Good Time is the cinematography. It is a little bit, not to disparage the film too much, it's a little bit sloppier than Good Time. I think they had a different DP on this shoot too. I don't know. There's a couple scenes here and there which I think feel a little bit more bigger budget and a little bit more tasteful for mainstream audiences, but I think they still kind of nail just the panic-inducing nature of living in a place like New York City and being a character like Adam Sandler or being a character like Robert Pattinson in Good Time, where you know you are not a good guy and you know that you are not living or abiding by the law, and you only have a matter of time to get everything right and fix things so that you can be comfortable. But you know as you watch these guys' films, finding that like peace of mind and being fully comfortable is never going to be possible just because of all the decisions you make. So I think that's definitely the style they've definitely honed with their work.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see it. And Adam Sandler, I mean, he's a good actor.
Oh yeah, if he did more films like this, he would be one of the most well-respected actors, like, ever.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, even in movies, like I always think about like Big Daddy. I mean, he's good in that movie.
I'd say he's good in quite a few of his comedies, and I do respect his independent range by owning his own production company and kind of making the films he wants to make. It's just, you know, there's a point where you can just see a tired Adam Sandler, and you can see a much more energized and much more lively Adam Sandler who really gives a shit about the role he's playing.
Yeah, totally agree. Sometimes he just does look drunk and tired. And I hear a lot of his movies he makes are just him and his buddies on vacation.
Pixels, his magnum opus.
Oh geez, directed by Chris Columbus too.
Yeah, that's okay. Chris Columbus followed that up with Christmas Chronicles with Kurt Russell, so he's almost like earned his way in the limelight once more.
Oh, that's the best on-screen Santa yet. All right, so my number 4. Yeah, my number 4 is going to be Knives Out.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I really, really liked it. And I think it really comes down to just, hey, I know this has been oversaid, but the movie subverted my expectations, as Rian Johnson does. I thought I was going in to see a whodunit movie, and lo and behold, we found out who does it within the first 30, 40 minutes, right?
Yeah, I would say so. At least the first half hour.
Yeah, and so from there, I really, really did not know what to expect from the movie, other than I knew the movie had a great ensemble cast with really, really good performances from everybody, especially Daniel Craig. I thought this is one of his best performances in a while. I mean, that caricature he puts on, that country accent, just had me laughing at every line. Just really, really well plotted, so entertaining, a total crowd pleaser of a movie, that's for sure. I mean, I saw it with a great audience where everyone was laughing and clapping at all the jokes, so that definitely helped. And you know, it's a smart movie. It has a good style. It reminds me of a Clue a lot, in sort of that mansion it takes place in. And yeah, I mean, he really turned this genre on its head, I thought. And we haven't had a good murder mystery in a while. And I thought this one kind of pulled it back to that old school feeling of it, and had a lot of flavors. Reminded me of Edgar Wright films in a lot of ways, actually.
That's an interesting point you make, and I think the last murder mystery, at least mainstream, that we got was maybe Murder on the Orient Express by Kenneth Branagh.
Oh yeah, but everybody already knows that one.
Exactly. You know, people probably wanted something more original. That's a story that's been retold many, many times. I pretty much agree with what you said there. I don't personally like Rian Johnson himself, personality-wise. His smug sort of fuck you kind of attitude. But I was actually very surprised when I saw this film. It's not on my best of the year, but it was, I think, a really more than average murder mystery that was really well shot, had a cool eclectic mix of characters that weren't overplayed or too stylized. Like they all had a thing to do. They all had an irk or a twitch or a character moment, I would say, with our main heroine, who's basically trying to get to the bottom of all this, even though she's dead center, kind of at the blame. And I thought there was, certainly a lot I was not expecting to see. I didn't know where it was gonna go after that first 30 minutes, and it did make me kind of want to watch it again, just so I could see all those footprints sort of line up and kind of piece together what I was missing the first time, because it is, more often than not, it is right in front of your eyes and you're just not noticing the first time because there's so much flooding the senses, visually speaking.
And I really liked how the movie builds up its main character, played by Ana de Armas, who I think last movie I remember seeing her in was Blade Runner 2049. She was good in that, but she starts out as kind of this quiet side character, and then I think as she tries to unravel what's happening and what's going on and the way she interacts with all the other characters around her. I mean, she's a illegal immigrant, so you have of course, some of the family members are bashing her and some are saying they're trying to protect her, but you realize everyone is in it just for their own self-interest. And I thought that sort of unraveling of the family was interesting too.
Rian Johnson, don't really care for the guy, but he can turn out some interesting material here and there.
Have you seen Brick?
I like Brick. Brick's really good. I thought Looper was okay. Not great, but it was okay.
Yeah, I'd say Knives Out was his best movie.
All right, moving on. Number 3. This is a film from a little production company called Cine State, and it's directed by a new up-and-comer named Henry Dunham. But this is a little crime thriller called The Standoff at Sparrow Creek.
Okay.
The rundown of the plot is after a mass shooting at a police funeral, a reclusive ex-cop named Gannon finds himself unwittingly forced out of retirement when he realizes that the killer belongs to some of the militia that he joined after quitting the force years ago. So once he understands that the shooting could set off a chain reaction of copycat violence across the country, this guy quarantines his fellow militiamen in this bunker. I think it's at a lumber mill, actually. They use this headquarters to sort of butt heads, have a series of grueling interrogations, while very hell-bent on figuring out who the killer was amongst them, and turn them over to the authorities as soon as possible to prevent any further death. On the surface, you could probably compare this to something like Reservoir Dogs or The Usual Suspects, and I think that comparison is certainly understandable, much in the vein of, something like Joker with Taxi Driver or The King of Comedy. But I think this separates itself from those movies pretty strongly in that it was more of a compliment, and was a film that kind of just takes a new location. It's this bunker that's so dimly lit. Most of the characters are silhouetted throughout most of it, and again, kind of like what Rian Johnson likes to do sometimes, subverts the trope of the whodunit and sort of reveals early on who's in charge and who was actually at risk, and you pick up as it goes along who's responsible, but you don't know what any of these characters are going to do in reaction to that sort of scenario. You don't know what's going on in their heads fully. We spend each time with one of them, and everybody's kind of a bad egg. Everybody's being investigated and has these dismantled, very odd secrets revealed about each and one of these militiamen. It was shot on a $100,000 budget. It's a very minimalist thriller, and it's refreshing to see this alongside some of the other films that Cine State has turned out with S. Craig Zahler's films, and it's earned its spot in this new company that wants to make these very rebellious sort of cinematic films. Yeah, I would recommend this film. It's a well put together, taut thriller. But I probably want to watch this again now, talking about it.
I've heard about it, but add it to the list.
We should get rid of anything that can link us to a shooting.
One's missing.
Who's got it? One of you did it.
Do you have any idea what's going on out there? Do you get it? If we
we don't pin this on one person, this whole thing is going to turn into something that's not good. A lot of people are going to die.
And you? How do we know it's not you?
You're hiding something. What is it?
So my number 3 is one I expect you to have on your list later. So I don't know if we should both talk about it at the same time.
We can segue because I think this lines up perfectly with my list.
Well, my number 3 is Parasite.
Okay.
I don't know. This is a movie which you told me to go into blind. And I did not see any trailers, and I didn't know anything about it. But this is like the definition of like a gripping movie, you know? It's hard to put into words like what this movie is because the movie just blurs. Of course, it's about societal class and these 2/3 families who are all, you know, one family is pretty not well off, one family is very well off, and then one family is very, very, very not well off, of course. I kind of want to wait to talk about it more. Do you have it lower on your list?
Yeah, it'll be coming up soon. I will say to that, yeah, it's not a film where you can really place a single genre or even point of view on it. There's just a lot going on.
Right, exactly. I mean, even you have the super rich family, like, they're obnoxious, but ultimately, I mean, they're good people. And I would say the scene with the Kim family when they're just eating all their food and drinking their booze in their house is probably, it's got to be the best written scene of the year for me.
Really? I would say that's a good testament to those actors and definitely that setting too.
Of course, it has what I would say the creepiest shot of the year, which is the guy coming up from the basement.
Yes. Yeah, the scariest shot of the year from a non-horror movie, technically.
Yeah, but I want to talk about it more when you bring it up on your list, so I don't just run through everything.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. My number 2, while we're still on a Cine State binge, is Dragged Across Concrete, directed by S. Craig Zahler.
There's a reason I'm sitting behind this desk running things, and you're out there with a partner that's 20 years younger than you.
Hey, Anthony's got a mouth with his own engine, but he's solid.
I'm thinking about the kind of future I can offer my girlfriend.
Pops is a yesterday who ain't worth words.
Good heavens and praise be to him. Your absence was a weight upon us.
Thank you, Mr. Edmonton.
I don't like doing things with so many question marks everywhere.
There's a lot of imbeciles out there.
Start the party. This is a bad idea.
It's all cotton candy.
We have the skills and the right to acquire proper compensation.
Dragged Across Concrete.
I've just been fawning over this film since it came out and have enjoyed it so much on rewatch value more and more. This classic tale, 2 policemen, one who's an old-timer and his volatile, very younger partner who played by Vince Vaughn, the older-timer, of course, played by Mel Gibson. These 2 guys who kind of find themselves suspended after a video kind of leaks in the media because they express some a little police brutality, you could say, and it becomes the stir of their suspension, and you find that these 2 are kind of low on cash and have no other options and want that one last score so that they can just kind of get out and live a normal life. The younger partner, of course, wants to settle down with his girlfriend and propose to her. You have Mel Gibson, who is kind of like at the edge of his streak where he just can't quite keep up with the times anymore and wants to settle down with his family and move to a peaceful place. And then this is also all contrasting with Tori Kittle's character, who is an ex-con that is somehow brought back into the world of crime just to provide for his brother and his mother. And ends up kind of being, in a way, the most moral figure of the three. Following these three sort of descend into the criminal underworld to just to gain their just due is remarkably satisfying, and just shows that there is some wholesome nature in just the underbelly of how gritty and awful this world is, and what it brings to people who don't deserve any harm coming to them. I would say the first half of it takes its time setting up these characters and getting used to them, but the second half, you are hooked on this film because it's just a fusion of quiet conversational pieces and really frantic bursts of just violent imagery that you don't see coming. And it's loud, it's also quiet, it's slow, it's suspenseful, it's horrifically authentic with its set pieces. The way the plot wraps itself in this examination of our society, the police force, druggies, of criminals, terrorists, innocent people, bankers even too. The bank scene in this is probably one of the most haunting scenes of the film, where you just don't expect it to get as intense as it does. This heist sequence that, you know, the film kind of revolves itself around, and how it pits all these characters together in one room who you don't think would all be in the same situation. And it shows just how everybody's sort of at their bitter end. You know, their state of their belief systems are all being questioned the whole time through, and you feel bad kind of for everybody involved. But nobody is a central good character. They're just doing what's best to survive. And I think that's what's really refreshing about this film compared to other crime thrillers in the past that just don't have, I want to say, that just don't take the risks, don't have the balls that this movie does. And I think it really is a testament to S. Craig Zahler's commanding presence as a director and a writer, as a novelist who wants to explore just the deeply flawed human beings who are just trying to get by. And I would say this is, yeah, absolutely one of the best films of 2019, just on that alone. And I'm really excited to what he delivers in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but yeah, it was my number 2 also. I didn't really get to prepare anything for it because right before we made this list, I had saw that it was released. It had its first release in 2018, but was wide release United States 2019. So I guess it does place itself in the 2019 year. But yeah, I mean, I watched it again, and I don't know, I might think I like it more than Bone Tomahawk now, just for... At first, I appreciated Bone Tomahawk more for its, I guess, like, plot, more its streamlined plot, but I think S. Craig Zahler handles, like, this huge, somewhat sweeping story, like, much larger scale story. Like, he handles it really, really well. And like you said, tying in those scenes with, like, the bank teller and all that stuff, it really, really makes you hate those bank robbers. And as bad as people like Mel Gibson's character can be, it makes you side with him, you know? You just want him to take these guys out, like, no matter the consequences, like, through any means possible. And you really, really get to see their point of view. And it really ties into that relevancy, you know. Of course, they're put on leave because, you know, they're caught on videotape being too rough with a criminal. But like they said, that criminal was putting like drugs in schools and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, great direction, amazing writing. It feels like a novel at times, definitely. And yeah, I mean, having Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson in the film, like, they were just perfect together. Yeah, I also really like it, like a big surprise for me. I can't wait to see what S. Craig Zahler does next. I think he's gonna do that Western next, right?
Yes, it's I forget what the title is, but the script has been leaked.
Oh yeah, and I forget who's gonna be in it. Is it Matthew? It wasn't Matthew McConaughey, was it? It was
Matthew McConaughey has been selected to be in it, and I think it's Park Chan-wook directing and S. Craig Zahler writing.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what he does next. Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. Just like, I mean, I love cop movies already, and especially buddy cop movies, and this one was, but most of those tend to have some kind of comedic tone to it, and I guess this does in places, but overall takes the subject matter pretty seriously.
I never knew I was going to be so entertained by Vince Vaughn eating an egg salad sandwich for a whole minute and a half.
Yeah, that scene where they're just in the car watching and waiting.
This is definitely his best shot film of his 3 so far. I think they got somebody else to do the cinematography, but you can tell there's less loosey-goosey, free-roaming style sort of filmmaking with the camera work, like in his past 2. Like, everything here is pretty well staged, but it still has that wide scope that he's known for, where everything in frame is just like, it's kind of almost at a fisheye lens sort of view.
Cool.
Well, then I'll carry it over then to number 1, since we've kind of found a neat little segue here. Yes, my number 1 is, in fact, Parasite, directed by Bong Joon-ho.
What?
His past work, Snowpiercer, I thought was pretty good. Okja, I thought was just kind of meh. It didn't have the, it didn't have the gravitas that I kind of know his past work for. It seemed like there was sort of a divide between cultures and how actors sort of present themselves overseas as opposed to how they do for American audiences. And I think you can certainly clash, Eastern and Western sort of acting styles, but it's not an easy task, and I think Okja kind of gets a little messy there. The Host I really enjoyed when I saw that. It's been many years since I've seen The Host, but I remember thinking it was a really cool monster flick. And Mother, I thought, was a really cool, chaotic sort of revenge thriller that I wasn't expecting to see from him either. But then again, I shouldn't be surprised since some of my favorite revenge films come from South Korea. You have a movie like Parasite here, which I think is the film I felt the most cinematic chills watching, because I did go into it very blind and I was not expecting the level of care put towards the class dynamic, the class struggle, the class warfare, but on a very visual, almost kind of storybook level, because you are constantly being reminded by this uphill, downhill sort of battle. The further you go underground, the further downhill you go, the more poor, the more down on your luck, the more downtrodden you are. The higher up along the hill you get, the more privileged you are, the more rich you are, the more chances you have of having a strong livelihood with your job, and you're more financially stable, pretty much. And I'll say this right now, like, this family you follow coming from just this poor street corner just down in this bunker, they're not really a likable family. And if people go into this thinking like you are supposed to fully root for these characters, I don't think that's the point, because they do some pretty shady, horrible things just to get what they want. But you also understand why they do those things to get what they want, because they've been in such a rut for so long. And same with the upper class family. I do feel like they are also flawed. They're not perfect and clean cut. They're also kind of very ignorant of those below them too, but they're also just trying to survive and just go about their lives as they see fit, because they worked to get to that point. And it's tough to kind of see these two battling families not realizing they're at war the whole way through it, until this harrowing climax where it just gets balls to the wall crazy. The clash of genres in this, the visual aesthetic, the set design. I do love the well lit entryway to this bunker in this rich family's home. That is an image that sticks with you throughout this film, and you still think about it when you leave. It's just this weird gateway that's so polished, so beautiful, but could lead to like isolation and depravity and a sense of just loss. This is what kind of, I won't spoil what happens in the climax, but the whole time through, something is being hinted at with this space. Because it's got to be hiding something. It looks too neat. If we go deeper into the trenches, we're going to find something we may not expect and may not want to see, but exists. I think it's a suspenseful ride. I think it's hilarious. It's dark. It's creepy. It's depressing. It kind of just gels with all of these different sorts of genres, but does it so eloquently in ways that so many other films here really fail to do. And it is kind of weird to see how just now, like, it took people this long to kind of wake up to South Korean cinema. Because, I mean, this has been like a prominent style for so long. It's been, some of my favorite films come from South Korea. And it's just weird that, like, all these profound armchair critics, like, just now all of a sudden, like, are praising this movie. And I'm glad to see this movie getting the praise that it is. It is a little overhyped. But, yeah, it's like, where have you guys been under a rock for so many centuries?
I mean, I'm pretty sure The Departed is even based, or is even a remake of a South Korean film. And Old Boy is South Korean, I believe.
Yeah.
So there's been so many good ones. But yeah, I mean, Parasite scratches pretty much every cinematic itch you have. And maybe even ones you didn't know you had. But yeah, I mean, I thought some of the most interesting stuff was, I guess, kind of, you see this family that's so poor and down on their luck that you automatically sympathize with them, but at the same time they're somewhat deceiving, and, you know, like a parasite, they're kind of trying to take over this family and this home. Or on the opposite end, you have the very rich, well-off family who you kind of assume that, well, they're the antagonists, you know, they have everything they want, but I mean, they are generally nice people, and like you said, they're trying to just go on with their life and just live their life, and the movie doesn't have clear-cut answers. It's mostly just these great observations told in this gripping and intense story.
Yeah, I never got a sense that this was like a hate the rich, screw the poor sort of story, or it was never once attempting to like give any of these characters, you know, some sense of development and you know, a purpose and all that goes on. You know, you kind of see yourself in a bit of everybody, kind of in a way. And I would say probably the most innocent character in all of this is probably the little boy in the rich family.
Yeah, right. And one of the best ending shots ever of just the kid sitting in his house. So good. Very haunting.
I can't recommend Parasite enough to those who haven't seen it. It's been making its rounds. I think they just released a black and white version for a limited release. I don't know why they needed to do that. If Bong Joon-ho just really wanted to tell the same story but with a black and white filter. But I think it's hit Blu-ray, but it's still screening right now because of the award season.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of directors. They did that with Mad Max Fury Road. They released a black and white version. And last I saw, who was it? Steven Soderbergh or something re-edited Raiders of the Lost Ark in black and white and took out all the dialogue.
All right.
Yeah.
I guess to make it more serialized, I guess.
I think he wanted, I think he replaced it with a techno soundtrack.
Steven Soderbergh must have been really high.
He just did it all in one night. My number one was, of course, The Lighthouse. Talking about black and white movies. And, I mean, we've already touched upon it a lot, but just really, really good writing. I think the writing is what elevates this movie, and Eggers' use of old-timey language and dialogue. I've always been a sucker for that time period, and I do, even though it's not a seafaring adventure, I do like those sort of the nautical-based stories, you know, whether it's Moby Dick or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or even Popeye with Robin Williams, you know? I just love that setting, and I think the tie-in, which you said, I think the tie-in of the sort of mythical creatures like the mermaid and sort of the sea beast that Willem Dafoe is, I thought it was enough for me. I didn't really feel like I needed any more. Because I didn't feel like that was necessarily the focus of the movie. That was just kind of the icing on the cake on sort of the insanity that both these characters are going through. And, you know, like I said before, it's hard to make shots like that in that box format that look that good. I mean, I think only Akira Kurosawa can do it as, or better than Eggers can. So, yeah, I mean, just a really good movie. I think sort of where it ties in with The Witch is, I think Witch focuses, I don't want to call The Witch a feminine movie, but definitely its main protagonist being a young woman. It kind of has sort of those feminine themes running through it, where I think The Lighthouse is a purely masculine movie. Just these two men working alone together, and just sort of, the testosterone builds at times.
Yeah, which you could say is a good counterbalance between the two films.
Yeah, for sure.
But we are in agreement, though, that our film Manic Manor is still a million times better, and that Robert Eggers is a total hack.
He's a total hack. He stole from us all the way down to the farting.
We had 2 fart jokes, and he decided to put in 4 or 5.
Just to one-up us. The parallels are, it's just there. I mean, you can clearly see it, that he stole from us.
No, there was no credit. There was no phone call. There was no saying, hey, can I use these ideas and make my shitty sailor movie?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think we need to find all copies of The Lighthouse, burn them, and replace them all with copies of Manic Manor.
You don't like me cooking? Oh, don't be such an old bitch! You're drunk! You don't know what you're talking. How can I possibly like the horse shit you fix us for supper? You're drunk! You won't be saying that. In the kitchen shanty cooks. It was fried donuts 3 times a day. You're drunk. Country hand bigger than your drunk. I'm drunk. You heard me. Be drunk, damn ye! Drunk since I first laid eyes on you. You're fond of me lobster, ain't you? Drunken in a Virginia fence. I seen it. You're fond of me lobster.
All right, well, that rounds out our top 10.
Yeah, good stuff.
A lot of surprises.
Thanks for doing this, man. Good stuff. And we will see you guys at the next one. Oh, by the way, Jake, is there anything you would like to plug? Website, social media, anything for the listeners?
You can find me at Letterboxd at J Hirsch. That's JHIRSCH. Follow me on Instagram at Jacob Hirsch, JAKOBHIRSCH_art.
You can find me over at Letterboxd at Jeremobie. You can also follow me on Twitter at Jeremobie. I think my name is Germ Spader still, so that's how you'll be able to look me up. And you can also follow me over at facebook.com/Jeremobie and like that page for memes and new content. Have a good night, everybody.